Hello, beautiful. And what I really want to know is what is good in your life today? This is Kia with another episode of the Female Veterans Podcast. And before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to my sponsor, Grunt Style. You can visit them at gruntstyle.com, see what they're all about. They have a foundation that supports the veteran community. They are veteran owned. They hire veterans, and they make amazing apparel for all sorts of your life activities like working out or hunting or fishing. They're gun loving. So if you love guns, you got to go check out their cute t-shirts. And they have apparel for men, women, and children. So go check it out. And if you do your girl a favor and use code Baker, that's my last name, Baker, and you will get a 10% discount off of your very first order. And let me know if you like them and how you like their stuff, because, it's important to me that I align with the people that I work with, and I like the organization, and so far so good, but let me know how you're feeling. Go to thefemaleveteranspodcast.com and send me a message there. Okay, so with that, I want to introduce you to our guest. She is amazing. Her name is Donna Leffler, and she works with an organization I have come to really adore, the Portland Psychedelic Society. So, as you know, I'm really passionate about alternative therapies that can help us. And since I've been more holistic in my approach to my healthcare and my lifestyle, I have been living such a healthier, happier, and better life. And I wish that for all my sisters. So I want to bring to you all sorts of alternative and cutting edge therapies that are showing promise, because they may save your life or the life of someone you love. So without further ado, hey, Donna.
Hey, Kia. We love you at the Portland Psychedelic Society, too.
You guys are so fantastic. I'm going to come back and sit in on some more veterans meetings, and I hope more veterans will join up. You can be anywhere in the world to join a meeting. You can put your name as anonymous or a fake name if you feel weird about it. And you don't have to have your camera on. So if you want to just sit in and listen and learn without anyone knowing who you are, you can do that. Or you can come fully ready to ask questions with your name, your camera on, and ask tons of questions directly or in the chat. And learn a lot of things about plant medicine that could give you a chance to have a much happier life experience, which is what we all want, right? Or more fulfilled or more content, whatever word you like to use. So I love that. Will you tell us a little more about the organization, Donna?
Yes. Yeah. I like to say that it's a good place to find the others. But we are becoming less of an esoteric group. And as you know, psychedelics is really taking off right now. I mean, the psychotherapeutic dynamic using psychedelics in therapy, and just as an individual, alone with friends, microdosing, things like that, have been extremely beneficial. And what we do in the Portland Psychedelic Society, first of all, we have a vision statement, and we envision a world where everyone has the freedom and support to explore consciousness through psychedelics. But we are not only envisioning that, but we are a nonprofit that puts on educational programs and helps legitimize the modalities of psychedelics, and just gives you a platform to explore. We have so many different offerings on our platform. If you don't mind, I would love to just list a few, just so people can get an idea.
I would love it.
Oh, great. Thanks. So we have the Veterans Group. We have a BIPOC integration circle, community integration circles, psychedelics for the new and curious, psychedelic elders gathering, reimagining chronic pain, indigenous knowledge, psychedelic renaissance, the war on drugs and racism, creating ceremony and sacred space for psychedelics, healthcare, people that just need a community space to integrate. We have community integration, men and women's groups, a group for the neurodivergent, and just a lot of one-off programs like we did with you, Kia. We recently had Kia on our platform, and she did the Female Veterans podcast on the Portland Psychedelic Society platform. And she was also a guest for the Veterans Psychedelic Discourse, which was excellent. And all of those meetings and programs show up on our YouTube channel. We usually video the presentation. We leave out the question and answer just so people can remain anonymous. And then we do a lot of one-off presentations. We do a mushroom growing, and this all lives on our YouTube channel. We have deep dives into MDMA, 2CB, salvia, kratom, and all things DMT. We have therapists, PhDs, doctors, researchers, scientists presenting. We have addiction and recovery workshops. We've got all kinds of things. So if you are curious, you can watch in the comfort of your own home, go to a meeting, and just find a lot of information.
So, as you know, I will put the link to the YouTube channel in the description box of this episode. And if you don't know where that is, it is where you read what the episode is about. You want to scroll down because I put lots of information in that. So scroll down to the bottom and you'll see all links and all the not-for-profits that I work with in case you want to check them out and you want to support them, and all sorts of information on how to contact me and how to be a guest on the show as well is in that space. So once you read what the episode is, keep scrolling and you'll find out a lot more information.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So you guys offer so many amazing programs there. I think that it's like a variety of good information that you can learn from. I know I could sit on the chronic pain because I live with chronic pain and so many veterans do, that it would be interesting to find out more about chronic pain and how these types of plant medicine can impact that and improve the quality of our lives, because that's what it's about, right? All of these shows that I do, we did one in the first season. I think it was my third or fourth, or maybe my third and fourth episode was about ketamine infusion. Actually, that was KJ's episode. And I will never forget it, nor will I ever forget KJ. She's actually a really brilliant artist. Shout out to KJ. I know she listens. And one of the things she said was that she experienced joy for the first time having ketamine infusion. And I wasn't sure. Like, I thought at the time, I want to introduce some of these alternative therapies for veterans that seem to be gaining traction and working for them, from what I'm hearing from the mouths of vets. So I want to share that with everybody. And but I was nervous about it. And when I heard her episode, I became sure. So since then, we've talked about ketamine. We've talked about ganglion block.
Yes,
I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
And that was with Lauren, of course. She was on a previous season as well. She's coming back too, by the way, from a hippie and a vet on Instagram and TikTok. And we're going to have another great discussion. But we talked about that with her, and we talked about marijuana. Actually, I've had a couple of episodes about marijuana. So I'm really excited to talk about microdosing with you. So I guess if I was just hearing about this for the first time, what is microdosing?
So microdosing is usually about a 10th or 20th of a recreational dose of psychedelic or cannabis. You can microdose with cannabis too, which is also considered a psychedelic, but it is usually about 10 to 15 mics of LSD, if that's what you're using, or about 100 milligrams or more of psilocybin. And I wish I could give you exact numbers, but Microdosing is really about being your own researcher. So it's really the right substance for the for that person on that day, right? So sometimes I'll do 100 milligrams of psilocybin. Sometimes I'll do 150. Sometimes I'll do 15 mics of LSD in the morning, and sometimes I'll do 15 mics in the morning and 15 mics in the afternoon if it's a weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still a microdose.
And what does that do for you? What is the point of microdosing?
Well, microdosing can be good for a lot of things. It can be good for relieving depression, relieving anxiety. I mean, it's been touted to do so many things, and so many of my friends have reported so many benefits of microdosing, even getting their OCD under control a little bit to focus and get done what they need to get done. But it can cause you to have more cognitive enhancement. I like to say it makes me really curious and in the present moment. You know what I
Wow.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
And, I can just think of things differently, maybe solve problems or think about issues, or just possibly have a really good day without even noticing. So let's say I'll microdose in the morning. And I've just noticed throughout the day when I went to the gym, I did an extra set or I lifted heavier. In general, my mood was better during the day. I was more friendly, more social. And then I've also microdosed when I've woken up with low feeling tones, microdosed, and I've felt better with the onset of the microdose. And it wasn't that I was having, there's some effects you may get. A microdose used to be thought of as strictly subperceptual, but it's really a dose that allows you to function, drive, and do everything that you need to do in a day, although you may slightly feel it. And that may just be a feeling of well-being.
Wow. I know that we all want to have that feeling of
Right.
well-being every day as much as possible. So I understand that it can also be really good for productivity and creativity. I hear all of these rumors all the time that all of these, intelligent tech people in
Yes.
Silicon Valley it's the trend to microdose and, get really creative and productive at work, those kinds of things. But I know that it is actually profoundly beneficial for PTSD, which is what we talked about with Lauren on Veterans Day at the Portland Psychedelic Society.
Yeah, it helps. And just to address the other thing that you just mentioned about problem solving, like with the people in Silicon Valley, like we've heard about, there's a lot of research on LSD and not a lot of scientific research on psilocybin, yet psilocybin is most talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And with as far as microdosing with LSD and looking at a linear problem, 100 mics might be good for that. To sit down and perhaps figure things out, and have an answer. But yes, smaller doses of psilocybin and LSD, microdoses, probably 10 to 15 to 25 milligrams for psilocybin and maybe 10 to 15 to 20 mics of LSD, can be good for PTSD and relief of symptoms, as a variety of symptoms.
Amazing. And that's what I'm talking about. Like that's, I know a lot of vets that are suffering with anxiety, depression, chronic pain like me, PTSD, right. Like and they're at the end of their rope, right? When there's something out there that's so beneficial and the evidence is just mounting and building at how beneficial it is, I feel like I have to share this.
Yes. And safe.
Mm-hmm. I think it's surprisingly safe for most people who are unaware of all of the information, it is very safe and effective. And that's what we need, because in our community, the suicide rate, I mean, they say that 22 a day, but we know we just know. And in order to bring that down, I think we need something more than the care that we're receiving through, the VA healthcare system. And I know me personally, I have the experience, of I did everything they said to do. I took every med they said to take for 10 years. And at the end of that 10 years, I was incredibly overweight. I was miserable. I was depressed. I was riddled with anxiety and panic attacks. And I felt polluted, and I felt like I was going to die. I literally felt like I was going to die. And I knew that if I didn't change, if I didn't do something, that I would. I mean, and that's as real as I can be. I knew that I was going to die.
Wow, Kia, there are so many similarities in our story, as we've talked about together. Mm-hmm. And I had the same experience with SSRIs for 10 years. And I did everything. And I had, you just worded it so perfectly. And just the numbness and flatness that those drugs can bring about is just, it's insane and it's sad. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for them, but 10 years is just irresponsible, I think, for doctors to say, hey, you're going to be on this for 10 years. I don't know. I feel, and you said, I think, there are better ways to do it than what the VA is doing right now, and and how much we could help by destigmatizing these drugs, legalizing use. I mean, we know MDMA is the gold standard for trauma, for dealing with trauma, and then taking that down, and then perhaps introducing a psychedelic to start changing some of that hardwired beliefs and behavior. There's just so many things that can move us forward so much more quickly than what we have right now.
And I think we're at a fortunate time to be seeing this shift, because we're out here in the Portland area, right?
Right.
And the legal system has changed for us in regard to these things, and it's changing. Right. So I think it's a place where it's a hub where this can show the rest of the world of what's possible.
Absolutely. We're the leaders right now. We are hopefully writing legislation in a very conscious way for us to show the rest of the United States and the world of what can happen. Because, all of these drugs were criminalized and rescheduled in the 60s, when the government was very aware that, they don't want their citizens possibly seeing that war may not be what they're saying it is, or the way we're thinking isn't entirely correct. And, and it was also a war on non-white people.
Yeah, well, we know that to be true. Yeah, we know this. We
Yeah.
do. Then I love that you brought that up, actually, because this is one of my favorite stories of how the government was testing. And we know they tested on military, right? That's known. But they were testing LSD, the LSD trials, because they were trying to see if they could control people's minds with LSD. And it's like the funniest thing in the world to me, having the experience with it that I have, and understanding that it actually opens your mind. It expands your consciousness, and it changes the way you think in ways that are so profound that you have no idea unless you experience it. So I can just imagine to be a fly on the wall as they're figuring this out, when they're trying to figure out how to control people. Yes. And they're unlocking minds through every test that they're doing.
Yeah, unsuccessful.
So funny to me. Like such a fail.
And then, you can Google it and go to YouTube and watch and actually dose a platoon of people. But yeah, the government, yes, they've tried.
We won't go down that rabbit hole.
That's another podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole nother one. And so we talked about microdosing a bit. Right. And you gave out some measurements. How could the average person who is just like, okay, I don't really know what that means, how could we begin to make a plan of action to get started with this? If we're curious and we go, there's lots of books. I think it's Michael Pollan has a book that's amazing about microdosing and its effects. I will include it, the accurate title and everything in the description box. And then as I mentioned at our meetup, I watch a lot of videos on YouTube from Terrence McKenna. I was familiar with his work in the 90s, and his brother Dennis, and there's tons of videos there you can see on YouTube of those two with their experiences and everything, their studies and research that they did as well. Had the pleasure of meeting Dennis McKenna at a London Rail event. As you know, my main hustle is performance coaching at London Rail Academy. Yeah. So with the influencer from YouTube, Brian Rose, and he did a movie called Reconnect, and it was all about ayahuasca and his experiences with that, right? Which is another plant medicine. So Dennis was there with him with that. And so they did a Q&A after the premiere of the movie, which I had the privilege of being at in London. And I got a chance to meet him afterwards, a very kind and lovely man. And so this is, as we said, they started research, the government in the 60s. This is, and even before then, these are not new things. But because they have been so stigmatized, I think we have to get the word out because they are helping people. We're seeing very clearly they're helping people. So if I've done some research on my own and I've listened to this podcast and I'm curious now, how can I get started? How do I know? What do I need to do to measure appropriately and find supplies and things like that so I can try this out?
Well, first of all, yeah, I love Dennis McKenna. And I am a big fan also of James Fadiman because he's been doing this research the longest. He's a psychologist with degrees from Harvard and Stanford. He's taught in 4 different universities. He did his dissertation about psychedelics in the 60s. He's a researcher, a consultant, an author, and is probably responsible for the phenomena of microdosing and has the largest database on either crowdsourcing, people that have contacted him, his own research. And he's got a great book that I'd like to recommend. I don't get a kickback from it. It's called The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. And it teaches you not only about high dose safe journeys, what all the elements should be, but about everything psychedelic. It's just a great book to have on your shelf. But if I was just going to get started after doing the top-down research, because I'm a big believer in knowing what the substances are that you're putting in your body, what it does to your brain, and all the benefits. Like you said, you dug into YouTube. There's so much on the internet right now about microdosing. You can go to Double Blind, and I'll give you all these links, Kia. Double Blind to learn about microdosing. You can go to Third Wave. You can go to listen to every podcast on psychedelics today. That's a masterclass. But if I was going to get started and I knew I wanted to do it, the first thing I would do to keep good records and really do the citizen research to see what the effects and benefits are for me, I'd get a jeweler's scale. And you can get those for about $20 to $25. It measures, if you're microdosing psilocybin, it'll measure it out in milligrams. And then if you're doing LSD, and I kind of like to recommend to people to try both, because some people attune more to LSD than psilocybin and vice versa. And LSD is a little more energizing than psilocybin and a little more predictable for me. Whereas with psilocybin, I might microgram and feel great, or I might get into an issue and go, okay, I'm going to just sort of work on this little issue today, or it might bring up some sadness. So, if you're ready for that, that's cool too. But I would get a scale, or I get the LSD and try to find out how many mics are in it. People say 80 to 100. We really don't know. So you have to cut up the tab or the gel or the paper, and then you have to experiment on yourself. So if you're going to use just psilocybin, you're able to measure it out in grams. I always go, I get a journal. How am I feeling that day? Well, I woke up and I have low feeling tones. So I'm going to start out with 100 milligrams of psilocybin. I'm going to take it at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to see where I'm at 10. And you can use your phone, so it's like you're not whipping out a journal. You know how much you took, you know what substance is, you know how you were feeling that day. Now you're going to see what effects that might have. And I like to follow Fadiman's protocol because I found that it works for me. I'll microdose one day, I'll take 2 days off. Sometimes the second day is the best day for me. And that's what he has also found, that a microdose has lasted over the course of 2 days. And again, you just have to note the effects that you're feeling. Then microdose again. So let's say you do it once every 2 days with psilocybin over the course of a month. And then you see what the effects are in that month. And he has found through his research that people microdose less often once they do a full complement over the month. So they microdose every 2 days.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I definitely have heard that you should space it out. So, but I want to go back a minute just in case we're getting ahead.
Yeah.
And I realized maybe people don't know what psilocybin is.
Oh yeah, so it's mushrooms, right? It's
Mhm.
people call them magic mushrooms. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many different species. Yeah.
So if there are many different species, like there's so many different strains of marijuana,
Cannabis, yeah.
do they affect you differently?
They can. Some are a little bit more potent than others, like cyanescence is more potent than, say, golden teacher. But I have to tell you from this, my own perspective is that for me, they all kind of work when it comes to mushrooms. If I'm doing a microdose, they're all about the same. I mean, cyanescence can be a lot, it's said to be 1.5 times more potent than, say, golden teacher. But when I'm doing a microdose, they're all about the same to me. That's something you have to find again. You have to find out for yourself. It's like, now, if we're talking about cannabis strains, I can definitely tell the difference between cannabis strains.
For sure.
But a microdose of mushrooms, it's not a huge difference for me, but for somebody else, it may be.
So, I guess, what could I expect to feel like when I'm microdosing? Like, in the first, maybe, am I going to feel it? How soon am I going to feel it? Am I going to feel it in the first 20 minutes? And then after I feel like the sensations in my body feel like at that time? And, and is it affected if I eat or anything like that?
Yeah, really good questions. I'm sure you found out for yourself what works and what does not.
Yeah.
I like to microdose on an empty stomach. It takes about an hour to an hour and a half to feel it. And it lasts about 4 hours. Again, this is where your own research kicks in. You might take 100 milligrams and really notice nothing, but just feeling a little bit better. You might take 150 milligrams, go out for a walk, and just notice, oh my God, look at, the colors are a little bit brighter. You may notice birds and what's around you. You may be more deeply involved with what's around you. But it really varies. I wish I could give exact measurements, but we know that really the person taking it too has a lot to do with it on those lower doses. So you might find a sense of relief. You might find yourself singing during that day to a song, just slightly being a little happier, maybe a little more, have a little more anxiety relieved, just feel freer, perhaps, like I said earlier, more curious about the day and the people around you. What do you feel?
Well, I agree with you. And I think those are important things that people would want to understand, because understandably, when you're first hearing about this, you may be listening to this episode and thinking, you know what, I have chronic pain, or I have anxiety, I have depression, I have PTSD, I have all of those things and a whole bunch of other symptoms. And I am at my end, and I'm hearing this, and I may not fully understand it yet, but I'm hearing this and I'm understanding that this is something new. It really isn't new, but it's being accepted more, and it's trending more, I guess, now. And I'm interested because it could potentially help me. That's what I've got. So now I want to know what I'm going to experience, what to expect. Right. And I think you've covered it really well. And my experiences, I didn't measure anything. And my measurements, I didn't have a scale. My measurements were more like caps and stems, right? Like very, very, very basic. And I know, because like you said, it's experimentation, right?
Yes.
With yourself. And I know that maybe if I take a couple of stems, it's going to affect me differently if I take a cap, or if I take half of a cap or a quarter of a cap. And it also depends on the size of the cap. It also depends on what I have in my stomach, how fast it's going to begin to affect me, and what the feeling is going to be like that comes over me. I definitely have my whole way of doing things. I must feel safe in my environment.
Yes.
I need to have the ability to be indoors and outdoors. It's just a must.
Agreed.
Right? I have to get out in nature, especially with any psychedelic. I have to spend some time in nature. It just enhances the experience for me so beautifully. But I also need to be inside as well if I want to just chill out inside. So I need to have music. I need to have positive things to behold. Like I need to have really great visuals for me to behold. And this is whether I do a macro dose or a micro dose, because I have experience doing both for many years. And in fact, the time I took a break was the time I felt the worst. Those 10 years that I was so miserable, I took a break from both cannabis and psychedelics. And I tried to go, the Western medicine approach. And I tried really hard. And it was gradual. All the medications that they were changing me on, switching me on, switching me off, doing this, doing that. And the years built up. And I remember it was a VA doctor. And I remember telling her, I feel so polluted. She was prescribing me some new meds. And I said, I already feel so polluted. I just don't think I can take anything else. And she said, well, I don't get a kickback or anything. And I thought that was such an odd thing to say. And it was actually the catalyst for me to be like, okay, I think I'm going to die. In fact, I'm sure I'm going to die, and I cannot take anything else. And I need to leave this healthcare system. Not everyone has the ability to move, but and that was one of the reasons why I was moving out of the area. And when I came here, I gradually started to go back into these things. So I already had a lot of experimentation under my belt. So like I said, I knew that what environment I needed to be in. Environment is critical.
Yeah.
in life in general, but especially when you're doing this kind of thing. And I like to have music, and I like to have, something to watch that's, I'm going to feel inspired by. Maybe I'm going to watch Gaia, the channel Gaia, you know what I mean? Or maybe I'm going to just listen to something that, like we were talking about before we started officially having the podcast interview.
Yeah.
We were talking about subliminal reprogramming or binaural beats. I really like those. So I like to have those kinds of things on hand. If I'm alone, I'm also like to be with people, right? Whether I'm microdosing or macrodosing. And I like to engage and just conversate and just talk, and, maybe we'll go for a walk, like you said, or maybe we'll I might go swimming if I have access to a pool but the thing is it just is such a beautiful, calm experience that leaves you feeling, for me at least, very refreshed. And I also think it's really critical that if you're going to be with other people, they be positive people with uplifting things to say, right? You don't want any sort of negative energy around you when you're having this experience because it can taint it. And those are the things that I've learned. Trying to keep your mind frame, especially if you're macrodosing, in a more elevated and optimistic and positive state is really, really important through the experience. But I know that it can also, it's really, really good for intrusive thinking. If you have intrusive thoughts that you get stuck in a loop of negative thinking, or you have one thought that's on replay in your mind all the time, this is effective for breaking that sort of unwavering loop. And I can't recommend it enough. I think it's great for you. Like, I recommend cannabis all the time, CBD and cannabis. I think it's an amazing therapy. And this is as well. And I think we're going to see this becoming even more and more mainstream over the next 5 years. So
yeah, you said a lot there, Kia. You really did. I mean, with microdosing, for the first timer, you want to do setting, and substance. So you want to do, what is your mindset? What is it that you want to look at if you're just microdosing? Because to you and I, it's like, okay, I can take a microdose. I'm going to the gym. I'm going to run some errands. I'll take a walk later, whatever. It's like, it's nothing. But we're both sort of intrepid travelers at this point. If you're brand new, the first time, maybe just take it at home, start low, go slow, right? So maybe do 50 milligrams and just see, are there any effects? Do you feel safe? Do you want to stay contained in your home? And like you said, have a little place to walk, and then up it and see where your dose is, or what we call the sweet spot, where you're functional, you're getting the benefits, you're feeling good, stuff like that. Now, when it comes to, of course, large dose journeys, to me, that is a completely different animal. And, I personally, there are many ways to do this. I've done it in a retreat with a group of people. I've done it with a guide and for therapeutic reasons. And, even, I just have to say, even if you explore this and you decide you get to the point where you want to have a large dose journey, even if it is a challenging journey, it is incredibly beneficial. In fact, I heard an interview with James Fadiman, and he was talking about that they had sent out a poll in Harvard to 100 people to say what was their absolute best psychedelic experience. And they were like, oh my God, it was in the top 10. It changed my life, blah, blah, blah. Same poll a year later, what was your most challenging experience, and where do you rate it as far as experiences? Same thing. It came out the same way. So that is just the amazing, one of the amazing benefits of psychedelics are things like this, the changes that it can elicit. And that's what we're looking at. And you also mentioned thought loops. That is what led me to psychedelics, was after I got off SSRIs through meditation. Then I got off SSRIs with cannabis, and that led me to psychedelics, because after all of that was taken away, of course, the reason I took SSRIs came right back up. And I'm like, okay, I mean, I spend this much money at the gym. I see a trainer, I eat good, I meditate. Why would I not spend that kind of time and money on my brain? So, I hired a guide, and I started exploring these, and it just made a huge change in my life. And one of them was thought loops,
Mm-hmm.
those blocks that stop us from getting where we want to go emotionally, within business, with other people, politically, whatever.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's beautiful. And I'm so glad that you shared that, because there's probably people dealing with that right now and can identify completely and maybe looking for something to help them, and this could be it, and I love how you were saying start small, because you have to, even, everybody knows that I was and worked in the pharmacy in the Navy. That was my job. I dispensed meds, all of that. And it's the same thing. You have to assess your tolerance. It's you start small and you see, okay, even when I was on Zoloft in years ago, I have the experience with the medication. So I actually told my doctor, I said, listen, I want to start on a small dose of of Zoloft, and you're going to start on 5 milligrams.
Right.
And I assessed and I said, okay, this is not enough. So I need to go up to, and I actually went up to 15 milligrams at some point. And then at some point during the course of that therapy, I said, okay, I actually had postpartum at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, I'm starting to feel like this is too much. So it's really about being also in tune with your own body, right? And being self-aware as to what's happening in your body with this medication, because these are all medications. Like the Zoloft is a medication. The plant medicine is a medication, obviously. So you want to be aware of how your body is responding to it and if it's too much or too little. So the point I'm trying to make is, when you take this and you start small, if you get to a point where you're like, I didn't like that felt like too much, you don't have to say, oh, this was bad for me, this was not good. It just means that was too much. Scale back and see how that's your sweet spot. That's how you found your sweet spot. If you don't go there and you're like, oh, this feels really good, you have to be mindful. This is where a great mindfulness practice will come into play, because when you're thinking, well, how am I feeling in my body? What am I thinking? What are the sensations in my body that I'm having during this experience? Then you can go, well, this feels good. This feels great. Or you might not even really notice, but until it's done, you can reflect back and go, wow, you know what? For the last 2 days or for the last day, I felt pretty amazing. Well, what's the only thing different? Oh, I did microdosing. And I actually don't think anyone should start with macrodosing on your own. You should really start with microdosing, just like I recommended. If you listen to the marijuana episode with the Kushners, or with April from the High Guide, you will hear us talking about, hey, start with CBD and work up in your milligrams of THC. Like it's a gradual thing, because you can give yourself a bad experience and then lose the benefit of what could have been. Right. So
absolutely.
Excellent stuff. So I know that you have so much knowledge. What do you think that we should know to really integrate all of this learning that we've got today?
Oh my God, that's such a great question. Just the word integration, right? Because like you were saying, Kia, these are all substances, and it's a whole person project, right? You're looking at everything about your life. You mentioned so many things today. You mentioned who is surrounding you. Who are you listening to? Who is in your life? What are you consuming physically, socially? What is this? What's all around you? What's happening with the whole person before you put a substance in your body? You know what I mean? That is sort of where the integration happens. You start doing this and then start changing things around you that aren't working. And I think that's where the integration piece comes in, not only with taking the psychedelic, but just looking at your life. Are you happy? Are you not happy? Can you make that change? So I don't know if I answered your question, well about to integrate it. Besides, what I've mentioned already is just be really informed of what you're doing. Start low, pay attention to your life. I mean, just, paying attention, to how you feel.
I think a lot of times we don't do that,
Mm-hmm.
which is good for us to emphasize, because we get busy with work and family and careers and trying to take care of our kids or our husband or just life's dramas. And we forget to be aware of ourselves and what we need, right? And we don't, I mean, so often we are the last person to get the love when we are so busy as mothers and wives and friends. And just really emphasizing that, I think, is really important. And going through this process will help you do that, I think.
Yeah, and like as well as I do, and a lot of people listening to this podcast, it's like when you're stuck in suffering, a lot of times you don't know how much you're suffering until you start to get some relief.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that's so true. That's so true. I mean, I didn't even realize, like, when I started to feel better, and part of that was also getting a toxic kidney removed out of my body. But when that happened and all of these pieces came together at one time, that was like the last piece of the puzzle of why I was so miserable and feeling so bad. And I still have all of my other symptoms of fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and chronic pain and all of those other things. But those are manageable.
Right.
And when I started to feel better, it was like, wow, I really just didn't realize how miserable I was and unhappy because of my health, with the toll that it was taking on me, even through years of therapy, and trying different things, to get myself out of this place. I used to say to my therapist, I am the most positive, depressed person you'll ever meet. No one understands how unhappy I am because I'm such a positive person. Yeah. And then she was like, when I first told her that, she didn't understand what I meant until she got to know me after a few sessions. Then she was like, oh my God, I understand what you mean now. You seem like you're just the happiest person, but I understand now that you are really suffering.
Yeah. And you said another great thing, because I always, people ask me about this. I always just say, when was the last time you had a full physical, and really got your body checked out? Because sometimes the issues we're having are medical too. And Dr. Dan Engel is another great person to look up. He's got a book called The Dose of Hope, and it's on MDN. It's about MDMA, but I love his approach to the whole body system, right? We're not a brain and a body. It's all so, we want to make sure the environment is good, and it's healthy for thriving, because we're all going to have pain. We're all going to deal with disease and aging, and it's like, how do you deal with it? Because there are so many good things right now to deal with pain, depression, anxiety that you can put on board to help you, even if you do have a chronic situation that you're dealing with, like you.
Absolutely. And many of us do. Many of the people listening to this episode, they do. You
Yeah.
know, we share in the fact that not only have we served in the military, we've seen and experienced things that a lot of people can't imagine.
Yes.
But we also have come out of it dealing with health issues, many of us. And so I think it's important to share this kind of information because, you know, you never know whose life will change or whose life might continue because of it. You know, I'm always surprised, I guess, or so appreciative to hear when people say that they've been impacted by what they heard on this show, because that's the mission of this show, you know, to help people feel better and to, you know, help my veteran sisters to continue, but to live a better, happier, you know, what, like I say, what's good in your life, to recognize and be aware of what's good in your life today, to feel better and to heal. You know, I think those are important things for female veterans. And I think I hope this episode has really contributed to that, to those who are open and ready to receive the information. And if you're not, hey, there's always other episodes. Maybe it's not your thing, and that's okay too. But it is out here, it's gaining momentum, and it can really, really help you or maybe someone you love. So share the information anyway. I have another question for you. You mentioned early something called a journey. What is that? Like, if I was like, okay, what is a journey and what could I expect from that? What would you tell me?
Well, I consider a journey a high dose situation where you have decided that you want to work on something. You want to look at a problem or a loop or something that's not serving you in your life. You want to make a change on a deep level. And it's a journey. You usually have preparation. You know, the way I do it, there are many, many ways to do it. You know, indigenous cultures have been doing this for millennia without the resources I have to do it, right? So when I do it, it's usually preparation. It is the day of the journey, which is in a safe, contained space with a trusted person. And it's probably 5 hours together of taking the medicine, going within. And that's what usually a big dose journey is for me. It's like usually in the dark with eye shades, sometimes with music, sometimes not. And it's with a person that, as I bring up issues, may be guiding me with these issues. So if there's nothing happening and I'm not going into the weeds, there's a lot of silence. You know, sometimes there's some talking. It just depends what comes up in the journey. You know, these psychedelics are very effective for quietly going within and working things out with it, not like talk therapy. They have been found to do this, which is just another amazing benefit of psychedelics, you know. So there's a day of that. You spend the day together, and then later in the week, maybe the next day, you start integrating what happened in the journey, what you came up with. So I do a lot of journaling. It's the same thing I do with microdosing. It's paying attention, it's journaling, it's getting like downloads from the journey later on, you know, maybe connecting the dots. Oh my God, okay, this situation looks like that. I get it now. I either see my part in it, or I see that maybe this behavior isn't serving me, whatever it might be. So it's for me more therapeutic. That's me.
I gotta say, I agree with that. I mean, legitimately, no lie, if I'm gonna be 100% honest, and I am, and if I'm gonna tell you what happened to me, because I always do, my first marriage, legitimately, this helped me understand my role in my first divorce and begin the healing process of that marriage ending. And I was married for 5 years, if you guys know the story, and it ended not well. And I was only 27 years old when I was getting divorced. And it was very traumatic for me the entire like last 2 years of the marriage. So it helped me. It helped me get me back on my path. It helped me get my mind straight. It's actually helped me more than once with relationships, if I'm going to be completely honest, and moving on and letting go and healing. So, I mean, I really can't say enough positive things about it. And in fact, I wanted to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. Now, I particularly do not like to have what I would consider unpleasant experiences. Like I like everything to be like really happy and positive, but there is value in those tackling what comes up when you have an experience where maybe something darker arises during your experience, and really looking at that issue and working through it. And I'm not surprised by that study at all, because I have actually helped people through those experiences. And for me, it's we used to call them a bad trip, right? Like we say, this is a bad trip. But actually, there is no bad trip, because you actually come out the other end. And I've been able to sort of help people through that process, and it's very difficult. It's you're there with them in the trenches, so to speak, when they're working through something really traumatic and serious that happened to them, while their mind is in an expanded state.
Correct.
So it's a lot, but at the end you get to see someone come through it and feel better. And even if it's not in that same day, within a few days, then you see that they've overcome something. And I think that's why what the trend is with ayahuasca right now, because that medicine forces you to purge out whatever is going to come up. And that is really healing, when it allows you to face things that you've been suppressing for a long time, but you don't have any control over it. So it's not for people who don't like to like control, right? They don't like to lose control. Ayahuasca for sure is something that once it's in you and it's going through, it's going to do what it's going to do. So that's
a big one. Ayahuasca. Wouldn't start with that.
No, definitely start with microdosing. So if there's one thing you take away, plant medicines are very helpful. Do not start with ayahuasca. Okay. I mean, I know it's trendy and people are doing it, but if you're going to ask me, my opinion, I agree with Donna. Okay. Don't start there. Start with microdosing. Just like we said, don't start with, the highest dosage of THC possible. We said start with CBD and like sort of assess how it affects you. And you also mentioned keeping a journal, or you could do a voice recorder on your phone, or you could do a video on your phone, but something that keeps track where you're experiencing this and you can honestly express what you're experiencing and how you're feeling. I think that is something I didn't do when I was younger, but I found to be so beneficial to the experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And usually with high dose journeys, sometimes, like guides will write down, things that you're saying and let you know. And like in the Netherlands, I know when they do psychedelic assisted therapy, I think it's really protocol for them to record what's happening too. And I've heard that with other practitioners where sometimes it brings people back to the place they were in the journey to let them reimagine what was happening at that time or relive that moment and get more in touch with it. And that's part of integration too, if that's something that you want to do. There are many ways to do this. But yeah, containment's good. And like you said, trauma does come up. When you put can come up. And that's why if you're leery or you don't think you should do it, or you then do it in a contained way. Some people are more like, I'm just going to take 5 grams at home. And that's cool. For me, it was just like, before I go on this journey, I want somebody that has been on the journey before me to help me just go in the right direction. Or if I'm having a difficult experience, just to support it, maybe hold a hand or, because we know that these substances also at high doses, especially, allow people to somatically experience it and move the energy through their body too.
Yes, absolutely. And also, I think that the point of integration after an experience like that, because it does change you and you experience so many things, that I think it's really important to sort of process everything you experience and discover how to bring it into your life now. Right.
Yeah, like you said, to make some changes, right? So you might be hitting some blocks and go, oh my God, that came up in my journey. And I thought this might be a good way to change that situation. Okay, how do we implement that into your waking, sober life? Let's look at that. Let's see how we can move on. It's about change. Whether we accept it or not, we're changing. The world's changing, our bodies are breaking down. How do we live with all of this and be a positive force, or, what I mean? It's like what you're doing, Kia. I look at it the same way. It's like, there's just like, you're bringing all this positive information to your audience in just the most wonderful way. I mean, I'm not a veteran. I listened to Kia's podcast because we connected on social media, and I'm like, who is this woman? Because I had started the veterans group because I felt so strongly about the amount of suicides that were happening per day, and it just was not reasonable that the government was not moving these things forward. She contacted me and I just started listening to her podcast as a non-vet, but just a woman. And I was just like, she's amazing. And I love these people that you're having on your podcast.
I'm blessed to connect with amazing women every single day and that are open and candid and willing to share their story for those that are not ready to share yet and to help them heal. And I think it's really cathartic to share too. So I think it's a win for everybody. And it's just such a gift to be able to have this platform that people want to come and hang out and spend time with me and talk stories and share them with everyone who tunes in. So I really appreciate everything you said. I feel like very honored, and I'm so glad that you were able to make it and we could do this. So I just have a couple of more questions for you before we wrap it up, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, Kia.
Okay, amazing. So we talked about starting small. We talked about assessing. We talked about starting with microdosing and everything like that and setting up your environment. What other tips would you have for someone who wants to get started, maybe trying this out?
And do you mean that in the way of putting the experience together as far as what they may need?
Exactly.
Well, I think we covered that pretty well, because we want the set, we want the mindset, we want to look at what you're working on, why you're microdosing, the substance, getting the scale, measuring it out, setting up your day, starting low, going slow. And the only other thing I could say is if you have a consistent supply of either mushrooms or LSD, so it's the same dose all the time, that's really helpful because you're using the same product all the time, so you know exactly what you're getting and how much it takes.
And how do we get a supply of mushrooms?
Oh God, I wish I could help everybody with that. As you know, this stuff, psilocybin is, mushrooms are illegal most places. That is changing. However, you can get spores and grow your own in certain states. Now, spores aren't legal in every state, so you have to check. You can go on, I think it's Etsy, and order spores. And I'll give you this for your show notes, where you can order spores. And then how I started was I got the spores. I got this thing called an all-in-one. And I just inoculated this bag, which had the grain and it had the perfect environment to grow mushrooms. And I inoculated it with the spores, put it in my closet for a couple months. And I'll put that in your show notes too. They have a video on how to do everything. And I grew a block of mushrooms. And then I just dried them in my home in front of a little fan. And that was it. Another place you can buy is called Zydor in Oakland, California. You can buy every form of mushroom you want there. Chocolates, capsule, dry. I mean, they've got a great menu. So there's a couple, those are the two ways that I know, other than everyone in this community, as you connect with the psychedelic community, wherever you may be, it's a good place to meet people and make connections. So you have community, you might get some tips on where to get whatever you need. And that's my best suggestion.
I think that was excellently explained. So if you're somewhere where it is not legal, my disclaimer is I'm not suggesting that you do anything illegal that you are uncomfortable with, but you're an adult. Make your own choice, make your own decision, do your own research. And you've learned here how to grow, where to go to learn even more about it. And, you can find a community in your area of people who might be like-minded as you and have more information than you have. And if it can enhance or even save your life, I encourage you to, of course, do your own research. A lot of information will be in my show description box that you can look over. And then I encourage you to do what you feel is best for you, is what I will say. And if all else fails, come to a meetup at the Portland Psychedelic Society to learn more. And they happen all the time. You can go to the Portland Psychedelic Society website, Facebook page, Instagram, all of that. They're all over social media. Go to the YouTube and you can find lots of information and you can come connect. I might even be there. You can connect with me. You could certainly connect with Donna and a lot of other amazing people and other people like you who are there to learn, who may be new to this, who want a community to learn from. And then there are certainly lots of places on TikTok that provide information, but be careful where your sources are coming from, as with anything, and then just do what you feel is best for you, is my advice. Armed with as much knowledge as you can be armed with, and then go for it. Like I did when I moved out here to the West Coast. I said, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to go holistic. I'm going to get off all of these meds. I'm going to figure out what diet I need And it turned out, for me, with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, treating it like an autoimmune disorder was the best thing I could do. Minimizing gluten, that's something else I did. And then adding in plant-based medicines as my therapeutic treatments, as well as exercise and art, and and just looking for things that gave me a blissful feeling. So I think they say follow your bliss. I love that. And I think that's Joseph Campbell
Yes.
quote. And I love that because I think it's really true. If you look for the things that you're passionate about that give you joy, it might be something you did when you were a child. Like, I used to love to write in my journal. I used to like to draw. When I pick up those things, or color, they have all those adult coloring books. People love them now. Like, if you find things that just give you those little moments of joy and you string them together, you'll feel so much better in your life. And I say this all because this was like my care plan. So like, if you go to the doctor and they say, okay, this is your treatment plan, we're going to put you on this med, we're going to do this, we're going to do that for you. And you have to, stop eating sugar, which I also did as much as, I mean, it's in everything, it's inevitable, but they give you this treatment plan and you've got to follow it. Right. It's what I created for myself, that was my treatment plan, and everything I did there led me to here. And one of the things that I do to follow my bliss is this podcast. Mm-hmm. And I really want to thank you for being on it, Donna. So thank you so much for being a guest. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap it up?
I was just listening to it. You just described integration. It's all over your life. It was a pleasure being with you again, Kia. I was just really enjoying this process of getting to know you better and hanging out with you. It's so much fun.
Well, we'll do it. I mean, it's not like we live far from each other. We can do it at a place outside.
Yeah. God, what would that be like?
You know what I mean? Like, we'll just go hang out. So it will be a pleasure to have you back again to talk about MDMA in the future, because I know that's up and coming and I have experience with that as well. And I'm just really open-minded, and I think you have to be. But it turns out it's been beneficial for me, because now I can turn around and sort of help people who are new to these things and who are just, coming out of the cocoon and being a little bit more open to these things that, were so taboo in the past. So let's talk about MDMA and ketamine and all of these good things in the future. I would love to have you back.
Sounds good, Kia. Thank you so much.
So one more time, I just want to shout out the Portland Psychedelic Society. They have meetups all the time. Like, really, I encourage you to go to the Veterans Discourse. It's wonderful. There's wonderful people that gather there. You are free to answer questions. You can be anonymous if you like, or you can join in completely. And I might be there, so we can catch up there as well. And I just encourage you to go and explore that as an option, as a way to just move forward slowly, right? And I want to mention Grantstyle. So grantstyle.com. Shout out to them for taking a chance on this girl and sponsoring a few of my episodes for now. And I really like their stuff. So go check out their cute t-shirts. And if you love guns, you have to buy that. Like, I have like 7 t-shirts from them. I have an amazing t-shirt that says "fuck cancer." It's one of my favorites they have on there. I mean, because really, my best friend's husband is stage 4 right now. So I really feel like that. And I have lots of cute shirts from there, especially my Navy t-shirt, which I'm very proud to represent my branch. Go Navy. And so check out grantstyle.com, get your 10% off with code Baker. And I want to thank you guys for coming on this journey with me. I love you guys, and I will talk to you next time.